Blue lights in the mirror, a quiet road, a driver who knows he hasn't done anything dramatic but also knows this moment can go sideways fast. The officer walks up, looks in through the window, and asks the question a lot of people answer without thinking. Do you know why I pulled you over? That's usually the first trap, because a traffic stop can feel like a conversation, but it's often an investigation at the same time, and the biggest mistake people make is assuming they're required to help build the case against themselves in many ordinary encounters. They're not. They do have to stay calm, they do have to follow lawful instructions, and during a traffic stop, they generally do need to provide things like a driver's license, registration, proof of insurance, and in some situations their name. But beyond that, a lot of drivers start talking simply because silence feels awkward. Tonight, imagine a driver named Marcus. He's heading home after meeting two friends for dinner. Nothing wild, nothing reckless. It's just after PM he changes lanes, touches the line for a second, and a patrol car lights him. Up a mile later, Marcus pulls over safely, rolls the window down, keeps his hands visible, and waits. He's nervous already. Most people are. The officer approaches and says, "Good evening. Do you know why I pulled you over?" That question sounds harmless. It even sounds polite, but it's one of the most common questions drivers answer in a way that hurts them. A nervous person might say, "Was I speeding?" Or "I may have been going a little fast," or "I looked at my phone for just a second." The officer didn't have to prove anything yet. The driver just started filling in the blanks. That's why the first question matters so much. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" is often not a question you're required to answer. It's an invitation to explain, guess, confess, or agree with a version of events before you even know what the officer actually observed. Marcus does the smarter thing. He stays respectful and says, "No, officer." Short, calm, nothing extra. That answer matters because it avoids volunteering a theory that may become evidence. People think honesty means saying everything that pops into their head. But real honesty also includes not guessing under pressure. If you don't know exactly why you were stopped, saying less can be the more responsible answer. And that moment leads to something even more important. A lot of viewers have been taught that staying silent always looks guilty. In real life, it often looks disciplined. Not rude, not hostile, just disciplined. The officer asks for Marcus's license, registration, and proof of insurance. Now this part is different. In a normal traffic stop, that request is not the same as small talk. This is one of the moments when drivers are generally expected to provide the required documents. That's a key distinction people miss. There's a big difference between handing over required identification and answering open-ended investigative questions. One is usually part of the stop, the other can be optional depending on the exact circumstances. And the law where you are? Marcus hands over the documents. No attitude, no sudden movements, no speech about his rights, just calm cooperation with what he's actually required to do. The officer glances at the paperwork, then asks the second question. "Where are you coming from tonight?" Again, a lot of people answer right away because it sounds casual, normal, almost friendly. But think about what that question does. It starts building context. Was the driver near a bar? Leaving a friend's house? Coming from a neighborhood where something was reported? Coming from somewhere that can be used later to make another suspicion sound more reasonable? And here's the important part. Many drivers answer these questions as if they're in a customer service conversation instead of a police encounter. They're trying to be polite, they're trying to seem easygoing. So they say, "Just dinner or my buddy's place," or "I was out watching the game." None of that feels dangerous when it leaves your mouth. But you don't know how the answer will be interpreted once it's written down, remembered later, or placed next to other details. Marcus understands that, so instead of filling the silence, he gives a respectful boundary. "I'd prefer not to answer questions." That line is powerful because it's simple. He's not arguing, he's not escalating, he's not refusing a lawful order. He's just declining to help turn a basic stop into a broader interview. And that phrase matters more than most people realize. A lot of police questions are designed less to get one magic answer and more to see how a person talks when pressured. Do they change details? Do they sound evasive? Do they ramble? Do they volunteer something unrelated? Do they accidentally create a contradiction? Once you see that, the whole stop looks different. Then comes the third question. Where are you headed? This one feels even less threatening. People think, why not answer? "I'm just going home," but this is where stress starts working against ordinary people. A driver says he's headed home. Then later the route looks odd, or he says he's going straight there, but he planned to stop for gas, or he says he came from dinner and is going home, but his passenger later describes the evening differently. Now, A simple answer starts sounding like a story that changed, even if nothing criminal happened at all. That's one reason experienced lawyers so often tell people not to chat their way through police encounters. Small details that seem harmless to you can sound meaningful once they're taken apart later by someone else. Marcus sticks with the same calm approach. I'd prefer not to answer questions. By now, some viewers may be thinking, wouldn't that annoy the officer? Maybe, maybe not. But this is where maturity matters. The goal is not to control the officer's mood. The goal is to avoid making a stressful encounter worse with unnecessary words. Silence is not magic. It doesn't make a stop disappear, but it can stop you from accidentally creating new problems that weren't there when the blue lights first came on. And if you've ever felt unsure about what you'd say in this moment, that uncertainty is exactly why these stories matter. Most people don't rise to the occasion during a traffic stop. They fall back on habit. If this kind of practical, real-world awareness helps you think more clearly, subscribe and stay with me, because the moments that cause the biggest trouble are usually the ones that feel the most ordinary. The officer studies Marcus for a second and changes direction. Have you had anything to drink tonight? That's the fourth question, and it may be the one that makes people talk the fastest. A driver who had nothing to drink often blurts out, no, absolutely not. A driver who had one beer with dinner may say just one. Someone else says not really. And that last answer, by the way, is one of the worst. Not really sounds like a joke when you're relaxed and like a problem when you're standing on the shoulder of a road under flashing lights. This is where people get fooled by their own innocence. They think, I'll just be honest and this will clear everything up. But if the answer is just one, what did one mean? One full drink? One earlier? One strong pour? One finishing right before driving? Suddenly, a driver who was trying to sound honest has handed over a fact that may become the center of the stop. That doesn't mean every officer is acting unfairly. It means the question has consequences, and people should understand that before they answer. Casually, Marcus has already seen the pattern. Every question sounds small, every answer opens another door. So again, calmly, I'd prefer not to answer questions. Now let's slow down here, because this is where responsible advice matters. Nothing in this story means you should argue, refuse lawful instructions, or act clever on the roadside. If an officer gives a lawful order, follow it. If your state requires you to identify yourself in certain circumstances, that may matter. If you're driving, handing over the required documents is a different issue from narrating your evening, and laws can vary by state and by the exact facts of the stop. That's why the safest mindset is not I never have to do anything, it's I should know the difference between complying and volunteering. That difference is everything. The officer now asks the fifth question. Do you mind if I take a look in the car? This one is framed almost like a favor. Not a demand, not an order, just a request wrapped in casual language. And that's exactly why so many people say yes. They don't want to seem difficult. They don't want the officer to think they're hiding something. They think that agreeing will speed things up. Sometimes they even laugh nervously and say, sure, I've got nothing to hide. That line has probably caused more regret than people realize, because when an officer asks for consent to search, the pressure is psychological. It feels as if refusing makes you look suspicious, but consent is not the same thing as a lawful command. If you agree, you may be giving away protections that were still intact a second earlier. Marcus doesn't argue, he doesn't make a speech. He doesn't say you can't do that. He says the cleanest possible version of the truth. I do not consent to any searches. That answer is respectful, clear, and important. Notice how different that is from the internet version of knowing your rights, which often sounds aggressive and theatrical. Real life usually rewards calm, repeatable language more than dramatic one-liners. The point is not to perform confidence. The point is to avoid surrendering rights because the moment feels uncomfortable. At this stage, the stop has told us something larger than the 5 questions themselves. None of them looked dramatic. None of them sounded like a movie interrogation. They sounded normal. That's what makes them effective. Do you know why? I pulled you over? Where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Have you had anything to drink? Do you mind if I take a look in the car? Every one of those can seem like harmless conversation, but together they can turn a minor stop into a much broader investigation if the driver supplies the building materials. And here's what many people miss. Even truthful people can harm themselves by talking too much. Stress changes memory. People estimate times badly. They forget what they said 2 minutes earlier. They try to sound friendly and end up sounding inconsistent. They answer the question they think was asked instead of the one that was actually asked. That's why the lesson here is bigger than memorizing 5 specific lines. It's about recognizing a pattern. Marcus's stop doesn't become dramatic. The officer goes back to the patrol car. A few minutes pass. Cars hiss by in the dark. The adrenaline is still there, but Marcus has avoided the mistake that traps so many drivers. He hasn't turned nervous conversation into evidence. Eventually, the officer returns. The original reason for the stop is addressed. Marcus is told about the lane issue. The encounter moves toward an ordinary ending, and that ordinary ending matters, because so much bad advice online is built around fantasy. It acts as if every stop is a showdown or every officer is waiting to pounce on a technicality. Reality is usually more mundane than that. But mundane does not mean harmless. Ordinary roadside questions can still carry real consequences. That's why calm, quiet discipline matters more than theatrical defiance ever will. If you've been through something similar, think about which of these questions would have pulled you into talking. Most people don't realize it's the easy ones, not the hard ones. The casual tone is what lowers their guard. So let's bring it all together. If you're stopped, start with safety. Pull over properly. Keep your hands where they can be seen. Stay respectful. Provide the documents you're generally required to provide. Follow lawful instructions. Don't escalate. Don't argue on the roadside. But when the questions shift from identification and instructions into investigation, understand what's happening. You are often not required to answer questions like why you think you were stopped. You are often not required to explain where you came from. You are often not required to explain where you're going. You are often not required to answer whether you've been drinking in a casual conversational way that expands the stop. And you are generally not required to consent to a search just because it was asked politely. The exact legal details can vary by jurisdiction, and none of this guarantees how any stop will unfold. But as a practical rule, the less you improvise, the less likely you are to create trouble where none existed. That's the real takeaway. Most people think knowledge shows up as a clever answer. Usually it shows up as restraint, a short answer, a calm boundary, a refusal to confuse politeness with self-incrimination. And maybe the most valuable part of all is this. Once you stop seeing these questions as casual chat, you start hearing them differently. You realize the stop is not the moment to prove how cooperative, witty, or harmless you are. It's the moment to stay steady, comply where required, and not volunteer more than the law demands. Because a traffic stop is one of those situations where the smartest move can feel socially unnatural. Silence feels awkward. Boundaries feel uncomfortable, but discomfort is temporary. The consequences of unnecessary answers can last much longer. So the next time you hear one of those familiar questions through a half-open window under flashing lights, ask yourself one quiet question of your own. Am I being required to answer this? Or am I just being invited to talk?